This is our second lesson in the Islam unit of the RMPS National 5 course. Just a bit of a reminder of what is included in the unit of Islam. We have the topics of the nature of God, which really covers what Muslims believe about Allah. Khaliphas, which is their responsibility to look after Allah's creation. Free will, which means Allah created humans with a choice to obey Him or disobey Him. Sin, which involves anything that is disobedient to Allah. We looked at the Prophet Muhammad, who was Allah's final messenger, as Muslims believe. The Qur'an, which is the Islamic holy book, the words of Allah recorded by the Prophet Muhammad. And we also looked, it also involves judgment, which is this idea of Allah's final judgment on humanity that is yet to come. Al-Jannah and Jahannam, which is Muslim belief in the afterlife, in heaven and hell. The 5 pillars of Islam, which are 5 commandments that all Muslims must obey. Living according to the Qur'an, which is how modern Muslims practice their faith today. And finally, Muslim worship practices. So in the previous revision lesson, we looked at sin, we looked at the life of the Prophet Muhammad, we looked at judgment and Al-Jannah and Jahannam, the 5 pillars, and living according to the Qur'an. In this lesson, we're going to look at the nature of God, Khaliphas, free will, the Qur'an itself, and finally, worship practices of Muslims. So firstly, let's have a look at the nature of God. What do Muslims believe about Allah? Here's a quote from the Qur'an. He is Allah, the one and only Allah, the eternal, absolute. He begetteth not, nor is he begotten, and there is none like him. So Muslims believe that Allah, God, is unique. There's no one like him, no human being or person or anything else. And so how do you speak about someone that is totally unique, that you can't compare him to anyone else? Well, Muslims have particular language they might use to describe Allah. We use things like talking about him being eternal, omniscient, that he is the creator, omnibenevolent, and omnipotent. You might recognize some of these words, but can we define all of them? Well, eternal. That means that Allah, Muslims believe he was never born and he will never die. He has always existed. Omniscient. That means that they believe that Allah sees everything, that he knows everything. There's nothing that Allah doesn't know and nothing that goes on that he isn't aware about. That Allah is a creator. Of course, people who believe in God, a lot of religions believe their gods created the world, and Muslims believe that about Allah, that he's an all-powerful creator and he made a perfect, ordered universe, that he was the sole creator. He was the only one who created the universe. He made the world and everything in it, including humanity. Omnibenevolent. Well, that word might be a bit strange, but part of that word is benevolent, which means good. Omni means all, totally. So put those together, and that means that Allah, Muslims believe Allah is all loving, he's all good, he's all merciful, that he is perfectly good in every way. And finally, omnipotent. That just simply means that Allah is all powerful. There's nothing that he cannot do, there's nothing that is too difficult for him. So those are some of the language that Muslims might use, or we could use to describe Allah, what Muslims believe about Allah. But the Quran doesn't use that language itself. It doesn't talk about Allah being omnipotent or anything like that. Instead, in the Quran, there are 99 names recorded about Allah, or given to Allah. And these different names represent some of those different characteristics we just talked about, that he's all powerful, that he's loving, that he is the creator. As the names go scrolling up, you can see some of those, that he is great, that he is wise, that he is strong, that he is all able, the first and the last, that he's eternal. And what I'd recommend is not that you memorize all these names, or you can if you want, all 99, but rather just memorize 3, 4, 5 of them, and particularly how they represent those different characteristics of Allah, that he is powerful, that he is a creator, that he sees and knows everything. If you can do that, then when it comes to an answer in an exam, you can give examples of names of Allah and how they represent what Muslims believe about him. One of the key things that Muslims believe about Allah is that he is one. There is only one God, and that Allah alone is that God. This is what Muslims call Tawhid. It's their name for this belief in the oneness of God. And it's the opposite to polytheism. Polytheism says there's many gods, there's many different deities that share different powers and maybe fight among each other and compete among each other. Well, Muslims say that no, there is not many gods, there is only one. That is Allah. There's no competition, there's no fight for his power. He is totally and utterly powerful, and there's no one that shares any of his characteristics. Only he is all powerful, all good, all loving, all knowing, eternal creator. Only he alone. And that is Tawhid. The opposite of Tawhid in some ways is Shirk. And shirk is what Muslims might call the unforgivable sin. And that is to say that Allah has a partner, maybe another God that shares his power, or maybe even a person that maybe has some of that power of Allah or some of that abilities or characteristics of Allah. Shirk is the ultimate sin in Islam, and any who commit it maybe by worshipping other gods or suggesting that Allah is not all powerful, not all knowing, won't ever be forgiven, but will be sent to hell. And there's a couple of quotes from the Qur'an there that back up what Muslims believe about Tawhid, the oneness of God, and Shirk, this idea that anyone might suggest that Allah is not the only God. So, with that knowledge, and maybe you've gone back and had a look at some of our lessons on the nature of God, on Tawhid and Shirk, which you can find in the Google Classroom, have a go at answering this question. Just pause the video and have a go at answering this 4-mark question. Describe what Islam teaches about the nature of God. See how you do, and then come back and restart the video, and I'll give some suggested answers. Okay, so how did you do? Well, let's see. Here's a few suggested answers. You might have written something different. You could either maybe add some of these answers to your attempt and see if you can get a few more marks. Muslims believe that Allah is the one and only God. Nothing can compare with him. No one can share any of his attributes. And of course, we covered that. Muslims call this belief Tawhid. So that would get you 1 mark. Here's another one. Islam teaches that Allah is transcendent. We haven't maybe covered that just now, but transcendent just means that Allah is above all in a way that he's separated from creation, that he isn't part of creation, but he is the creator. And yet, they also believe that he can be known by humans. And how can humans know him? Well, Allah has revealed himself to us by the words of the Qur'an, revealed to the prophets, and particularly through the Prophet Muhammad. So that would get you at least 1 mark there. Another thing you can say is Allah has 99 names recorded in the Quran, and these names demonstrate some of the attributes of Allah, such as the forgiving, the loving, the kind. These demonstrate Allah is a benevolent God, a loving God. Now, perhaps you said one of these. You could talk about the different characteristics we just talked about Allah. Islam teaches that Allah is omnipotent. This means all-powerful. There's nothing he can't do. Omniscient. He knows everything. Benevolent. He is good and kind and willing to forgive people. A creator. Eternal. The judge. We didn't quite cover that one, but it means he will judge our lives. And on Judgment Day, he will decide whether we have been righteous. That means we've obeyed his laws in the Quran. Obviously, don't use bullet points in an answer like I've done here. This is just to make it simple for you. If you're writing an exam, make sure you write these out in full sentences and paragraphs. Final one. Islam teaches that Allah has no children, nor does he have any parents. So he was never born. He doesn't have any children that share in his divinity. Muslims reject the idea of polytheism. That means many gods. And do not believe that Allah shares his divinity with anyone or anything else. Okay, so that was the nature of God. Now we move on to really looking at what Muslims believe about humans, and particularly what Muslims believe about free will. That is, that Allah has given us this ability to choose to think for ourselves, okay? So, what do Muslims believe about free will? Well, they believe that Allah created humanity. The Quran says that He made them from the clay of the earth. So, the very beginnings of creation, after He created the world and the plants and the animals, He took the clay of the earth and shaped it into humankind. Humans have been made innocent. This is something that's in some ways unique to Islam. They believe that humanity is innocent. There's nothing they have done wrong when they're born, and this is called fitra. Okay, so this idea of innocence is called fitra. That means that Allah didn't create us evil. He didn't create us to do evil, but actually He created us innocent. But Allah has given us the gift of free will, and that is choice, the ability to choose how we want to live our lives. So we can choose to obey Allah's good law, as recorded in the Quran, to be obedient to Him, or we can choose to reject His good law. And that is Muslim understanding of sin. Just doing anything that disobeys Allah and His law in the Quran would be understood as sin. So Allah created humans with this sense of right and wrong, maybe what we call a moral law or even a conscience, that we are all able to understand right and wrong. So we can choose to listen to that conscience, to that understanding of right and wrong, or we can misuse that gift. Again, that is our free will. And therefore, we are responsible for our own actions because we make our own choices. So we're responsible for actions, and therefore we will face the consequences of those actions. Allah created this world as a test to see if we would obey Him or disobey Him. That's why He's given us free will and placed us in this world to see if we will follow His laws or disobey Him. So Muslims believe that we're all born innocent, as we said, fitra, that we are born without sin. We haven't done anything wrong when we're born. Allah didn't make us evil. But they also believe that we can be swayed through our choices to commit sins and leave that state of innocence. And we can maybe be swayed by our ego, maybe a desire for self-importance rather than worshipping Allah. So kind of looking for our own interests, our own desires, rather than living our life according to what Allah says. Maybe we could be motivated by greed, influenced by greed, making our goal to gain money or stuff, rather than obeying one of the 5 pillars zakat, to give away our money, to be stewards of the things Allah gives us. We can be swayed by negative influences. That might be being influenced by other ideas or teachings other than the Quran. Muslims are very clear that their lives should only be influenced by the life of the Prophet Muhammad and by the words of Allah in the Quran. So being influenced by anything else, whether it's celebrities or social culture or even religious ideas, can lead us away from Allah's will. Could also be influenced by temptations, and really just anything that Muslims might want that disobeys the laws of Allah. So this is different ways in which Muslims could be influenced away from that that state of fitra, innocence, into sin. Muslims see, therefore, this sin as a choice. That's that decision of free will that Allah has given us. We can choose to disobey Him, and that is sin. Islam teaches that God, Allah, is merciful. Individuals can be forgiven when they sin, and that all these different sins we've talked about, these minor sins, whether it be lying, cheating, stealing, can be forgiven by Allah if they repent. And the most, however, having said that, the most serious sin is shirk, which is worshipping anyone or anything in the place of Allah. This sin cannot be forgiven, and if someone commits shirk, they will be sent to hell. So in order to resist temptations and remain obedient to Allah, Muslims have to practice patience, which they call sabir, S-A-B-R. Muslims practice patience. That just really means sometimes free will, being given that free will to choose, sometimes means they just have to practice patience. They might not get what they want immediately in order to resist temptation. And they practice that patience knowing that when they are patient and wait on Allah, instead of making their own choices, that Allah will reward them, particularly when they go to Al-Jannah, heaven, that He has a reward there for them. They will get everything they could possibly want. And there's a quote from the Qur'an talking about how Muslims must live patient lives, waiting for Allah's rewards. So we've covered plenty on Muslim belief in free will. How about you pause the video and try this question. Describe what Islam teaches about human beings. And it's a 5 marker, so try and get 5 points with explanations about what Islam teaches about human beings. Well done. Well, let's have a look at some suggested answers. And again, you can add these to your own work. See if you can get a few more marks. The Quran says that Allah created human beings from clay. Human bodies do not last forever. All of us eventually die. However, Allah will reunite the soul and the physical body at the hour of judgment. So that is the creation of human beings, the fact that they are only temporary, and that Allah has a purpose for us beyond death. Allah makes all humans innocent. That's the idea of fitra. And what's key to that belief in fitra is that Allah did not create evil, but rather gave humans this gift of free will, the choice to obey His laws as recorded in the Quran, or to disobey them. Allah has given humans a conscience, that's a knowledge of what is right and wrong, and we can choose to listen to our own conscience or ignore it. Therefore, when people do wrong, it is their own responsibility. In order to overcome temptation to disobey Allah, sin, Muslims must practice sabir. This means patience. They have to trust Allah, knowing that they might not get everything they want in this life, but if they continue to obey Allah, He will reward them in the next life. And if Muslims do sin, Allah is willing to forgive them if they repent. This means to confess to Allah they have disobeyed Him and start obeying His laws. Okay, so we've now covered the nature of God and free will. Let's move on to Muslim teaching of Khaliphas. So Khalifa is the belief that Muslims believe that human beings are stewards, that we've been created by Allah as caretakers of His good creation. Allah made humankind after the earth, after plants, after animals, and He made them in order to look after His creation as His servants. So Muslims believe that Allah created plants and animals before He made humans, and therefore human beings have to respect their role in creation, their position in creation, and look after the creatures of the earth. In Islam, the word, it means both peace and submission, and Muslims believe it's only when humans submit to the will of Allah that they find peace within themselves and with the rest of creation. So this idea of Khalifa is about finding peace with creation, with the world around us. It teaches Muslims not to destroy or waste or abuse the earth that Allah has given to them, but rather to respect it. And the earth was created. Why do they respect it? Because the earth was created out of love. It's given as a gift from Allah. Therefore, it should be treated with the same love and respect. So you can have a go at answering this question. What do Muslims understand by Khaliphas? Now, if you want a bit more information, you can again go back to the Google Classroom lesson we did on Khaliphas, but just have a go. Give me 4 things that Muslims understand about the teaching of Khaliphas. Okay, so here's a few suggested answers. So Khalifa means steward or caretaker. It's the belief that human beings are appointed as the stewards of Allah's world. Muslims are required to look after Allah's world and treat it with respect. Human beings are the most important part of Allah's creation, but they're made after the plants and animals, so human beings must remember their place in creation to protect and care for the world that Allah gave them. Islam is a religion of peace and submission, and to be a Khalifa means to live at peace with Allah's creation, not destroying it or exploiting it, but caring for all of it. Allah gave the world as a gift to human beings, so we're expected to act in a way that shows respect for this gift, and that might lead a Muslim to being maybe more environmentally aware, and they might want to show in showing their gratitude to Allah for creating the world. And Allah has given humans this role as Khaliphas in order to test them, to see if they will obey His command to be a good Khalifa of His creation. Okay, well, let's now move on to the Quran and what Muslims believe about the Quran and its importance to Muslims. The Quran, of course, is the Islamic holy book. Muslims believe that it is the words of Allah as recorded by the Prophet Muhammad. And Muslims believe that the Quran is perfect, unlike other religious books such as the Torah or the Bible, which Muslims believe do not accurately record the will of Allah. They believe that the Quran is the perfect recording of the will of Allah. And the Quran is only considered this perfect word of Allah when it is read in Arabic. And this is because Allah communicated it to Muhammad in Arabic. It was the original language that Allah gave it to Muhammad in. A bit of the story of the Quran and how Muhammad took down, recorded the words of Allah. So we'll just go through it step by step. The story of the Quran is that Muhammad was a merchant trader in the town of Mecca. The Meccan tribes, they worshipped many different gods and goddesses. Muhammad did not like this culture of polytheism, worshipping many gods, and often he left the town to meditate on his own in a cave on Mount Hira, the mountain next to Mecca. Now, Islamic tradition says that when one day he was in this cave meditating, the angel Gabriel came to Muhammad and he commanded him to read or recite the words of the revelation from Allah. He gave him this scroll to read the words of Allah. However, Muhammad was illiterate. That means he couldn't read or write. And he told Gabriel this. Well, Gabriel, in response, hugged Muhammad, and then the words of the Quran were forever written on his heart and mind. He just understood. He took them straight into his mind, what Allah was saying. Muhammad left the cave, and he then went and told the people of Mecca the message that he had received. And he told them they were to stop worshipping many different false gods and instead worship the one God, Allah, that idea of Tawheed, that Allah is the only God. The people who followed Muhammad's teachings eventually became known as Muslims. Now, the Quran was written down over many years as Muslims recorded the words of Muhammad, and these quotes, the quotes of Muhammad, were later collected into what Muslims now know as the Quran, a series of sermons and quotes of Muhammad, the Prophet of Allah. So there we go. That is the story of the Quran, of how Muhammad received the words of Allah. How about a slightly different exercise for you? Instead of doing a past paper question, maybe try this. Pause the video and create a 5-box cartoon strip of the story of the revelation of the Quran. What happened to Muhammad in the cave of Mount Hira. Now, do be careful. Don't include any pictures of Muhammad or Allah in that cartoon, as Muslims do find this disrespectful to do so. So pause the video and give that a go yourself. Okay, so let's move on finally to the topic of worship. How and why Muslims worship. Well, in Islam, worship is the act of religious devotion directed towards Allah. It's showing Allah, it's any act that a Muslim does that shows Allah that they love Him, that they respect Him, that they honour Him. And worship can be done in many forms as a result. There's lots of ways Muslims can worship. They can worship through prayer, which they call Psalm, of course. And of course they pray 5 times a day, is one of the pillars of Islam. They can worship through another pillar, zakat, giving money to charity and showing that they honour Allah in doing that. They can worship through reading the Quran, of course reciting the Quran as they do in mosques, or just reading it on their own, particularly in the original text in Arabic. They can worship by going to Friday prayers at the mosque. This is called Jama, and Muslim men in particular go on Friday to prayers at the mosque where they listen to the imam or someone else reading out prayers to Allah and they pray together. And also they can go on pilgrimages, for example, to Mecca, which all Muslims are expected to do once in their lifetime, to go on Hajj to Mecca. Now, of course, there's other ways Muslims can worship, particularly if you think of any of those 5 pillars. Those are all expressions of Muslim worship. So 5 reasons why Muslims worship. We've thought about how they worship. Here's 5 reasons why a Muslim might worship. Number 1, it helps create a sense of closeness to Allah and establishes a spiritual relationship. Muslims believe that they can know Allah, and actually by worshipping Him, they can understand who He is and be in this relationship with Him. Number 2, it helps develop a unity and fellowship with other Muslims in the Ummah, which is the Muslim community, both the local and global community. By worshipping together, Muslims feel part of that same community. Number 3, it helps Muslims to feel obedient to Allah as they know they're following the guidance in the Qur'an, so they know that they're living their lives as Muslims by worshipping. It reminds Muslims that they must obey Allah over anyone or anything else. Going to mosques, quite often daily, for a Muslim reminds them that they are living according to Allah's laws, primarily, not anyone or anything else's law. They're living for Allah. And number 5, for example, one of the pillars, you could do this for any of the pillars, but praying 5 times a day provides a rhythm for their daily life, which develops self-discipline. And self-discipline to Muslims is very important. It shows that they are being daily obedient to Allah in their lives. So once again, let's just pause the video once more for the last time and just have a think in what ways might worship affect Muslims in their daily lives. So what do they do to worship, and how does that have an effect on their daily lives? And think of it as a 5-mark question. Okay, so let's have a look at some suggested answers for that question. Well, worship provides a rhythm for a Muslim's daily life. Going to the mosque, for example, or praying 5 times a day and reading the Quran helps someone live as a Muslim each and every day. Worship creates a sense of closeness to Allah for a Muslim. Muslims believe they can know Allah through His words revealed in the Quran and by living in obedience to Him. Worship enables Muslims to feel a unity with other Muslims in particular, both locally and globally, as part of the Ummah, the Muslim community. Regular worship gives Muslims confidence that they are following the guidance of the Quran and living in their lives obedient to Allah. Worship requires self-discipline, which Muslims believe is an important characteristic. Muhammad was the excellent example of discipline, and Muslims will always try to imitate Muhammad's life in any way. Worship reminds Muslims of all the good things that Allah has given them. This makes them appreciate Allah's creation. And in worship, whether it's prayer or otherwise, they are constantly thanking Allah for the good things He's given them. That reminds them in every part of their life that Allah has provided for them. So that takes us to the end of our content for the Islam unit of the RMPS National 5 course. We've covered a lot of ground. You're always welcome to go back through these videos, have a look at maybe particular topics you might have not picked up everything, and go back through the Google Classroom material and have a look at that. Thanks for watching.